In this video, I'm going to show how I made the gearbox crossmember for the 8 HP BMW transmission and all the steps involved in that process. So this is the plate that I've made to bolt to the back of the transmission. So bolt here. This will be used to mount the bushing to the chassis, gearbox mount. It's a little overkill, bit of 10mm plate. That's all I sort of had lying around that I could use for this job, but it'll definitely be strong. So the bushing for the transmission, I'm going to use these shackle bushes. They're Super Pro, just generic leaf spring shackle bushes that I've cut down to be a little shorter, a little bit more compact. They were a lot longer before. I'm now going to machine up the sleeve that these will press into, that will then get welded to the chassis portion of the gearbox mount. I'm also going to machine the pin that goes through the center, as these didn't come with a sleeve that goes through the center of the bushing. So luckily I have some steel tube that I found lying around. It's a pretty heavy wall, and luckily it's almost the right internal diameter to accept the bushing in it. The outside is also perfect, so I'm going to clean up the outside, send a boring bar through the inside to accept the bushes, and then cut it back to the length that I need to make this mount. So the internal of this tube needs to match this, obviously. These are what look like about 28.5, maybe a touch smaller. This tube is almost 27, so we're going to take a mil or so off this to accept the bushing. So now that the inside is machined out nicely, you can see that the bushing slips in nice and snug, perfect tolerance. So I want to make this bushing overall 50mm. So then we need to work out the length of the sleeve between these 2 points. Obviously 6mm, 6mm, 50 minus 12 is 38mm. So this piece here, I'll bore probably to 40, 45, just so it's past where we need, and then part it off at 38mm long, and that'll give us the sleeve. Also, because I don't want to lose any of the OD of this, because I want to keep as much strength in this as possible with that sidewall being not quite as thick as I would like, but it'll still be fine. I would like to use the cutting tool to make this surface fresh, but that may take too much material off. So I'm actually going to use this belt sander while it's spinning, just to take the scale off the outside of the tube and clean it up ready for welding without removing too much material. So now that the tube's cleaned up, I faced the end of the tube so it's got a nice square surface. I've now set this to part off at 38mm, and that will give us our bushing sleeve. So now tube is done, bushing's in, ready to be welded. Just need to machine the internal crush sleeve. Now, making the sleeve for the internal of this, I'm going to use some stainless round bar. Firstly, because I have it on hand, and secondly, it means I don't have to paint it or get it zinc coated or anything like that. It's not going to rust. It's going to be very wear resistant, and like I said, I have some here. It's almost the right diameter. It'll just need to be turned down and then drilled through the center to match the 12mm bolt that I'm going to run in this. It certainly does. So we've got 20mm OD. We'll use the digital readout. 15.58, and slides on nicely. Just enough tension So I just also wanted to say I'm not a machinist by trade at all. I've just learned how to use lathes and things like that throughout my career. But yeah, this bushing and sleeve is now all machined. Bolt goes through, and we're ready to take this to the car and continue making the mount on the car. So another thing I see a lot with people making gearbox mounts and cross members, they'll use different bushings, and I like to use a shackle bushing, especially because the engine mounts on this car are also made with a similar style bushing. Having this on the back of the gearbox, I want to mount it in this position. I'm going to drill and tap a hole into this thick 10mm steel plate. This will then bolt to that. There will be a tab that comes around and mounts the front side of this bushing as well. But I see a lot of people also using these bushes in this horizontal, like east-west style. And I don't like that for a couple of reasons. The gearbox and the engine wants to twist as it goes through its power cycle. And this means it's going to be forcing through a sideways motion like that. That's not how this bush is designed to be used. If you mount it this way, north-south, it'll allow the bush to twist as the engine twists, and it's using the bush in its intended way. by 1.25, tapping drill size 10.8. So now that thread is cut for the mounting bolt and the bushing, it can go through. That'll bolt like that on the back of the gearbox. Nice and thick, well cut thread, very solid on that side. But now we still want to support this side to give it as much strength as possible, as this gearbox is pretty heavy and there's going to be a lot of forces going through this. So I want to make up a mounting tab from some steel sheet, something that follows that diameter profile, comes up and then bends back and gets welded to the top of this plate, just to support that side. Now that this tab is folded up, bolt will go through that, through the bushing, and then back into this plate. You can see that there is a little bit of a gap under there, but that's okay. I'll bolt it in place like this, tack it, and then just weld the gap once the bushing has been removed so I don't melt it. Now we reinstall back onto the gearbox. Slide the bushing back in. Now that is ready to be joined to these on each side, and that's going to support the weight of the gearbox. So I've used a jack to pull the gearbox up because it was just hanging on this strap before. I want the gearbox up as high as possible, so I've wound it up until it's touching the tunnel and then wound it down just a fraction. So I'm trying to get the oil pan on the gearbox as far away from the ground as possible. And now I'm making the car side of the gearbox mount. I luckily had this bit of medium wall steel tube lying around with a nice little bend in it. I'm going to notch a circle through the center here where the same diameter as the bushing sleeve, and then make up brackets each side to weld to. So then this tube will get notched around each side of that steel sleeve that I made, welded to it, and then welded to brackets the bolt here and here. So that's what I'm doing next. So these are notched now, both sides, but kind of lost more of the bend than I was hoping for, but that's okay, it'll still work, it's going to do the job. So this tube will go in here, and now this plate that's going to bolt into these two holes, I'm going to make a angle that comes across there, obviously with those two bolts in it, and then a face across here that this will then butt against and weld to. So I need to work out how long to make that to begin with. So if I hold that in place, and then I measure to the furthest bolt center. So I've made up these two plates, which will bolt in each side. Don't stress about the extra sharp edges and all that, it'll all get trimmed off once the tubes are welded to each side. So obviously this one will go in here, this one will go here, which I'm going to have to cut some off now to make that fit, that's okay. And then we're going to weld some tubes across. So this side, all ready to go in. And also this side. So I've ended up using the bend in it to bring it level into the mount and then back out down towards this mount because they're staggered. Once that jack pulls out of the way, it'll look better, obviously. I'm just gonna tack these bits in the car, 3 tacks on each join so it can't move, pull it all out, put it on the bench, weld it all up, and then reinstall it for the final time, I guess. With tacking onto the sleeve where this bush is, obviously there's polyurethane in there, so we don't want to go like super hot and melt it. Just a quick little one. Let it cool. So remember how I said not to worry about these jagged edges and stuff? That's because now we're going to cut them all off. I needed to know where these were going to land before doing that though. So these are all going to be free-handed. So I'm going to cut this off with the angle grinder. Really cut back around to here. And then across here. And we want to just take it all the way back to that bolt hole. And then I'll round that with a finisher. And then this side will be the same. We'll bring this all the way up to the thickness of this. So where that thickness comes through here, we want to meet it there. Like that. Cut that off with the grinder, make it nice, round it on the linisher, deburr all the edges, and then we'll have a much nicer shape. So we've gone from this to this. Much nicer shape. Saved a little bit of weight. Still very strong. Much nicer. So here's the finished crossmember from today. From start to finish, machining the bushing sleeve, the internal sleeve, cutting, notching the tubes, making the end plates, trimming the end plates, everything. It's been a fun project and I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions about this job, any suggestions, anything really, leave a comment and I'll get back to you. So now it's in the car, all bolted up, holding its own weight very nicely. Enough clearance for the electrical connector still. Happy days.